This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Man, I got something fun to share with you today. This gentleman you've heard many times on the podcast. He has his own podcast. We're going to be talking about that. He was a regular on the Bob and Tom radio show. He has toured from coast to coast doing his stand-up comedy and was a very successful DJ in the radio industry when that was less mechanical and more human. A very, very funny guy. Let's welcome back my dear friend, Tim Bedore.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you, or evolution honors you. I'm not sure your belief system's out there, but thank you.
Well, Tim, I want to talk about your podcast and your great take on religion and life. But first, as a stand-up comedy, we're both over 60 and there's more of a retirement feel. But I know you've been getting out and doing a few shows. What's happening out on the stage boards for you?
You know, it's been very interesting. I just did a gig at a casino in North Dakota, of all places. I live in Minneapolis, so we drove over there, my friend Pete and I, and played, by the way. Pete's a big golfer and a comedian, and we played on a course, one of the few courses left in America, with sand greens.
Really?
Do you know what that is?
Not really. I don't think I've ever experienced that. And audience, obviously, besides being a very funny comic and radio DJ and everything else, he's a golfer. So, Tim,
I think a golf addict.
Golf addict. Well, what is a sand green?
And I don't even know the why of it, because the rest of the course is grass, but the green itself is sand, and they oil it
and pack it down. And I don't know exactly the why of that, because grass does grow. The rest of the course was grass, but you have a green that is pebbles and sand, and they have these huge, it's essentially like a lead bar rake, and you are allowed to rake a path between your ball and the cup. Yes. And you smooth out the sand and you putt along this path. Now, so this was a week or two ago, and get this. So my friend Pete, who is far more addicted to golf than I am, he did the research and found this course. So we drive there day of show, and there's nobody at the course, literally not one car. And we think, oh, well, the course is closed. It hasn't opened for the season, whatever. But we get out, and there is a bucket with a lid and a slot. And it just says, put your greens fee in here and go ahead. Wow. This is what we call a well-managed public course. Well, so that had to be so strange to putt on.
Very. I mean,
wouldn't you think the rake would make it easy to get the ball to the hole? Did it work that way?
No, not really. I mean, you're just not used to having to hit a putt this hard, because now shots to the green stick, they will hit and stop, but you really have to hit it hard to putt. And the course, it was cute. It was such a good experience, because in some places there'd be a tee box for a hole right near a green. And so if somebody was teeing off, you couldn't hit your ball to the hole. You kind of had to work with each other if there had been anybody there, but we were the only people there on the course. It was just this mismatch, kind of all over the place course that obviously is somebody's passion, and the town supports it, little town. It was just a very unique experience. And then we go do the show. And So what were you going to say? You were going to say something?
I was just going to do my 2 cents on golfing in strange places. Jill and I had the privilege to visit Kenya, Africa, and we're big-time golfers, and we found the only golf course in Kenya, I think. And it was so unique because the hazards were herds of zebra and some antelope that we had to hit through or over. But I was relating it to the greens. The greens were horrible. We figured if we got within a foot and a half of what they said was the hole, it was in. And then the sand traps were basically carved out of the land and just churned up dirt and no sand. And the caddy that really didn't want to be there, when the ball went into what would be normally a sand trap, he'd say, oh, you don't hit it out of there. You just take a stroke and place it wherever you want. And it was just, it was kind of like what you were saying, is that it was 9 holes in the middle of frickin' Africa, and you kind of just made up your own rules, but you were still playing golf. And I think that's as you said, the addiction of the game, that we actually paid money to walk around this and hit around, herds of animals and stuff. It was wild, but I've never heard of a sand, actually gravel oiled green. I can't wait to share that with Jill.
Yeah, it's odd because then the next day we played at an Arnold Palmer course, and we told the pro that was working the pro shop about this, and he knew the course and said it's probably, there's only 2 sand green courses left in North Dakota. So at one time it was a thing, and I don't know if that's a maintenance thing or what. Maybe that,
well, they must have a
winter.
Yeah, they have a short golf season anyway with the storms and winter they get.
Right.
And maybe somehow the using sand and dirt as the green versus grass keeps it through the winter. But still, what an odd golf experience. Well, thanks for sharing that, Tim. How were the shows up there in North Dakota?
They go casino shows. They tend to not be a good comedy environment. People are there for reasons other than being at a comedy show. They're there to gamble. Perhaps the comedy show is free. So it's not a great environment, first of all, typically.
Well, and I know you act pretty well. I don't think of you as a guy that can reach in your hip pocket and have a lot of gambling material.
No, and that's the challenge. And it's just like golf. I think that's why a lot of comedians are fascinated with golf. Yes, because it's the same thing. You've got to play the course as it is, whether it's sand greens or, by the way, 50-mile-per-hour winds. We were playing in wind that you just wouldn't believe. I had an 80-yard shot to a green because you can scope it. I've got the scope, so I shot it. It was 80 yards, and I hit my 150-yard club and just made it.
Oh,
that's how fast the wind.
But I think that's an amazing, great analogy to bring it back to stand-up comedy, because a lot of comics are golfers, and golf is challenging at the sense, or I don't think challenging, I think it's one of the intriguing parts of the sport, is that every course you play has its own nuances. So you were dealing with oil sanded greens and heavy winds, and yet because we're crazy golfers, we still play.
Yes, and did okay. I mean, it's
you would die.
Really,
adapt or die.
I played better that day than I played at the course the next day, which was a far better weather day. And it wasn't, it's just random. But in comedy, you have to march out in front of whatever audience there is. If the mic's not working, I mean, it's your responsibility to do your best job and win in front of whatever circumstance you're facing. Otherwise, you don't get hired again. Now, it's not fair. It's not, smart for the venue to be doing that to you. The mic, we were going to get a new mic, but, just talk loud. You've heard every possible thing. And in fact, at this particular gig, they did it in the big showroom. So literally, it seats like 600 people in a very loose pack. And I said before the show, I don't even know why they want to do this. They want to come down and meet and see the showroom as if they're going to take any advice from me on the show. I said, well, why don't you tape off the back half of the room so everybody sits up front? And she says to me, literally, well, when you're on stage, you could mention that. Well, at that point, it's too late.
Wow.
What's the point? So why want to know what I want if you're not going to do anything that I suggest on how to make the show better?
Wow. Well, I really love your analogy between golf and comedy, and it is so true that any sort of professional like yourself that has played clubs, and not only clubs, but casinos and cruise ships and nightclubs and wineries and you name it, there's always that situation where you need to adapt to the room, but also like you mentioned, you have to adapt to the crowd. It could be a Saturday 8:00 show where everybody's there, part of the show and hungry for good comedy. And then you have a, Thursday night, bachelorette party that, whether you're there or not, they're going to have a good time. Right.
Right. I mean, and that's, by the way, the universal worst element in a crowd.
Oh,
is the bachelorette party. That's the worst. But what happened with the show in this big showroom, and there may have been 50, 60 people scattered throughout this big room, they were still playing pool. There were pool tables in the back of the room. So
you did mention that.
Yes. And I said, so this is what happened. It's this big multi-purpose room. There's a bar in the back. It's a big kind of semicircular room. There were dart boards. There were people playing darts near the stage while I'm on. There are people playing pool. So I decided to introduce Pete from off stage. And I just, for whatever reason, said, and I did the announcer voice, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." And then for those of you playing pool in the back, stop now. There will be no pool during the show. And then I could see through the curtain that they were wondering, if this is, like a law or something. And then I came out on stage and said, no, just kidding. You guys go ahead, keep playing pool. And so now they see the headliner of the show before the show. And I was just kind of, come down here, free drinks, come down. Anybody sits up front, free drinks. Not at this casino, at another one, but free drinks. Oh, come on. All right, well, here's your, first act of the show. So they had seen me goofing around kind of loose. So I introduced Pete, who's a very good comedian. He was on for 20 minutes, not one single laugh.
Oh,
except the only time they laughed was when he commented on how absolutely horribly this was going. Then they laughed. But
they
other than
shared that moment with him.
I mean, it was just, and thankfully, I was back in the dressing room and wasn't really hearing. I could hear him talking, but I couldn't hear if the crowd was laughing or not. So it didn't make me, more anxious or whatever. So when I came out, for whatever reason, and it works this way sometimes, that, a crowd that wanted to laugh but just didn't, and they're still ready to laugh, they're going to give the second guy or the next guy more of a chance and be a better audience. However, it worked.
Well, I'm going to interrupt.
Fine.
I'm going to interrupt and say, as a producer, I would clearly see that you going out and being loose and funny and kind of engaging with them previous to your set put them into the idea that, okay, this guy's, going to be one of us and going to be funny, plus I think it's genius. And I mentioned in your intro that you're a professional radio DJ, and you had that voice, welcome. And, and you could have gotten away with that probably because it's different than your regular voice and it has so much more authority. But the fact that you came out and said, oh yeah, just kidding, I think put the audience on your side from the get-go. So I take it you had a really good set.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, very playful, even tried new material, and it couldn't have been more opposite from the experience that Pete had. And if it had been a reasonable crowd, Pete would have done very well. Very funny guy. So it just is all part of what you learn. Some people will call it set the stage. You don't want to walk out immediately and jump into material because that seems a little desperate. Come out and move the stool this way and straighten out the mic cord and put the mic stand over here and just be very casual. It gives the audience this feeling that you're confident and they can relax. So, there's various ways to do it, but definitely coming out ahead of time before the show and appearing just, playful, it did work.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. So between golf and the stage experience, a trip worth making.
Yes, it was. And it was about a 7-hour drive over there. So it was a trip, but we got, some golf in and, just bizarre comedy experience. They just keep mounting. It's bizarre after bizarre after bizarre experience.
Well, you've had a full career of experiences. It's surprising that most road professional entertainers don't write more books because there are so many stories.
And it never stops. I was down, I don't know if we've talked since, I was down in Florida at doing shows at Planned Communities, which is, for someone my age, a perfect audience. It's just kind of like back to 1984, where the crowd was maybe 5 to 10 years older than you on a Saturday night. Well, they're in Florida at these Planned Communities now, but because of the hurricane that came through a few years ago, a lot of the properties are still not rebuilt. And the last thing that they do is to work on the community center. They've got to get roofs on people's homes, condos, all that first. You know what? This is far off the topic, but one of the problems they have when a disaster hits like this, not only do you have to import workers because you don't have enough craftsmen locally, but they don't have inspectors that can come out and say, okay, the plumbing's done correctly, now do the wiring. They just don't have enough. That would
slow down the process so much.
Completely. It's years later and they still, so they booked these shows for me thinking, we're going to have our rooms back and we can have 300 people. Well, two of the places, the main center room thing was not done yet in the community center. So we did shows from a model home in the living room of the model home.
You're kidding. Yeah. So an audience of 10?
They would fit as many people as they could. They brought in folding chairs. They brought in refreshments. But So, these models have couches and chairs and this, that, and the other thing. They're set up to look like you would have your furniture in there.
Yeah, it's like
and
doing
they put
a
up folding chairs.
Private party in a home.
In the corner of the living room, which is just so bizarre. But once again, as long as you don't seem uptight about it, you can put them at ease. So you come out and play, and who has to vacuum afterwards, and you kids get to bed, And
well, Tim, it shows your professionalism and your I think you said it well there, that the looseness and being able to just kind of go with the flow not only helps the audience, but helps the entertainer engage with the audience, which is, we both know is so important in comedy. Well, speaking of wild trips, a little birdie told me you were just in Ireland.
We were there for 2 weeks.
That's on our bucket
daughter,
list.
Claire. Yes. Now, and really, it's picturesque beyond, but especially if you have Irish heritage like my wife Karen and I both do. We're both about half Irish. You see where your people came from. My dad's parents were very gregarious storytellers, very, to me, funny and just very engaging. Well, you go over to Ireland and you see it wasn't just your grandparents, it's everybody. I mean, everybody tells a story. Everybody wants to entertain. They're the nicest people, just charmingly nice. And you can just kind of see where all the, the literature, it's just in their soul. It's in their DNA. They're just kind of thoughtful, deeper thinking, good values people, all good. But here's the thing that I will never do again, and I would suggest you don't do if you go there, is drive on what
wait a
they
minute,
call
I thought you were
roads.
on some sort of tour. You were driving yourself around Ireland?
Oh, every day. Every day.
Oh, man. It's like a whole different world, isn't it?
Oh, it's more than a whole different world. It's a suicide mission, is what it is. It's a death pact. So you're driving a car that has the steering wheel on the right side, not the left, and you're driving on the left side of the road, not the right. So that's upside down 2 different ways. And many of these roads, let's say your car is 10 feet wide, the road is 11 feet wide, but it's a 2-way road.
Yes. So the whole road is basically the same width of a vehicle.
Yes.
That would be, I would think, dangerous.
Yes. And in fact, I didn't even make it through 2 weeks, and I had it with this driving. I can't do this anymore. I do not want to do this anymore.
Well, it would be so stressful.
It's beyond stressful. I mean, it's crazy. The only way that it works, I tried to figure out the system. It's just that on these smaller roads, now not all the roads are like that, of course, but to get to the things that we had planned to get to, you have to go, 15 miles on this goat path, essentially. And by the way, the road is surrounded by ancient stone walls or hedgerows that are stone mounds that have moss growing in them. There's no shoulder. There's nowhere to go.
Wait a minute.
Alley.
How could you have 2 cars pass each other? I just assumed there was some dirt area or turnouts.
Oh, no, not at all. It's like going through a hallway. You're going through a hallway. And if you meet another car and you don't hit it, then somebody has to back up until you get to a spot, a driveway, or, naturally where the road, there was like some grass area you could pull off to. Yes, you have to back up. In fact, I played golf at a course where you drive through the course to get to the clubhouse, and you have to beep so that people who are hitting stop.
You're going to get pelted by golf balls.
Yes.
You're kidding.
Yes.
The road cut right through the course?
Right through the course. Right through the course. And there's a sign that says, watch for approaching golfers and beep as you go around this curve because they can't see you. And now, I'm not exaggerating. On a lot of these roads, if you go off the road, you're off a cliff.
This is in the mountainous area?
Hills, mountains, ruts, valleys. It's just, and they just take it with, that's our roads. Doesn't bother them. It's just the freakiest damn thing. You think, well, no wonder it's not an overpopulated country. Everybody's dying on the roads. It's just nuts.
Well, also, I picture there's a lot of agriculture and ranching there. I just picture from what I've seen in movies and stuff that you're going along one of those small dirt roads, and there in front of you is a flock of sheep or something. Was there?
Absolutely.
Did that happen, or is that just in my mind?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, no. That's the whole thing. In fact, we basically went to small town to small town to small town.
That must have been fun, though. I mean, besides the death
really,
road.
It's just very charming and really attractive, and especially the west and the southwest. It's by the ocean and just beautiful. But what you find is most of and it was all Airbnbs. I think we only stayed once in a hotel. So you're staying, downtown over a pub or in somebody's home. And it was all worked out. It was all great. But then you walk just 2 blocks out of the, small downtown, and there's all these nice homes, stucco or made out of rock. And everybody has basically an acre backyard, which is an acre that's bounded by old rock walls. They're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old.
So everyone's got a lot of land there.
Everybody's got, a lot of the homes have acres, and they have sheep, and they have cows, and they have donkeys, and no barns at all, because it doesn't freeze, so they don't need to put the cow in the barn. When they milk them, they just drive out, take a tractor or, a truck or whatever, or walk out and milk the cow, but they all just graze and live outside. So you've got this just picturesque, rural, right downtown look. There's sheep everywhere. There are more sheep in Ireland than people. So it's just, and the donkeys are the nicest damn animals. They're just very pleasant. They're very, my daughter would.
You're making friends everywhere.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, Claire is just an animal freak. And we were trying to walk from where we were staying to the little downtown to go to dinner. And she was calling this donkey over from the middle of this acre pasture that's in somebody's backyard. And we didn't think it would work, but sure enough, the animal whisperer brought the donkey over, and now she's ripping grass and handing it over. Claire, that donkey could bite you. No, she's just feeding the donkey fresh grass over and over and over again.
To the audience that Claire's your lovely daughter. And
yes.
You, her, and Karen went on this trip. Was it just the 3 of you?
For the first week, it was the 3 of us, and I was so glad because at first, Karen was the navigator, but my wife has direction, and she wanders and gets lost very easily. So now we're in a foreign country on the wrong side of the road, and literally, she's got the GPS, she's got the phone going, and she's looking to her left, pointing to her left, but says to me, "Turn right." So
married couples are so funny when it comes to that.
So we put Claire in the front seat right away. So, and she was much better at navigating than Karen.
It sounds like kind of a beautiful, stressful trip. And I just think it's hilarious that Karen and Claire were in when Jill and I travel, she sits to my right as my navigator, and to make sure that I get where I get. It sounds like a really amazing trip, and you still snuck in some golf. How was the golf there?
It was just so different, so craggy valley kind of, thick grass on the hill, and you're really playing the course as the land designed it. Nobody moved any earth to make this course. They just kind of picked a path, and that's what you shot through.
And they had real grass greens, I hope.
But yes, they did, because you can grow grass there like no place in the world. It's just unbelievable how lush and very, that's why the beef, it's some of the best beef in the world, because it's all grass fed. They never have to worry about bringing in extra feed.
Wow. Well, it sounds like an amazing trip, Tim. You and Karen and Claire had some great experiences, but it's interesting that the people of Ireland take it all in stride, because that's all they know. And for the poor ex-Californian now trying to figure out these roads and working around the sheep, quite an experience. Well, I think it'll help you write some more material.
Well, and you know what the worst thing is, or the most dangerous thing?
No, Tim, what was the worst and most dangerous thing?
Walking.
What?
Because, yes, you're so used to when you come up to a street and you want to cross it, you look to your left, and the traffic is coming from the direction to your left, and you can kind of half walk out, or at least step out. If you don't see anything on your left, you can kind of step out. Well, in Ireland and England, the traffic is coming from your right. And so you look to your left, there's nobody down there. You start to step out, and the car goes right past you, because it's on that side of the road. So you're not used to.
So whether you're in a car or not, you're somewhat at risk.
Yes. And if you're looking at a GPS unit and you're kind of following that instead of looking left, right, left, right, left, right, you got to be on your toes.
Well, one of the things we found interesting in London was that there weren't really crosswalks, and everybody jaywalked. And it was like watching one of those old Frogger games that people would run mid-traffic, somebody would zoom by, and they'd stand there and let the car go by, and then they'd finish. The cars never stopped for the pedestrians.
Yeah, it's a whole different consciousness.
Wow, that's wild. Well, the other thing I wanted to bring to, but your travels are certainly interesting, is that you have a terrific podcast. It's called An Agnostic's Guide to Heaven, and it's been very successful. It's part of my podcast network. But what was interesting is I heard your most recent one, episode 113, and you tell a couple great stories. Give us just kind of the Reader's Digest version of this episode, because it is, first off, everybody in the audience, if you haven't had a chance, go check out Tim Bedore's An Agnostic's Guide to Heaven podcast. They're really short, fun, kind of like him talking about Ireland and North Dakota, fun short stories that always have some message and very, very entertaining. But tell us a little bit about 113, because of course I'm anxious to find out who Dirk is. And thought your honeymoon, your newlywed story was pretty interesting. Give us a short version.
Boy, and that's going to be interesting to figure out what words we can use and not use. So the premise of the story is the worst thing that I'd ever heard of happening to a comedian on stage, or the worst thing that a comedian ever did on stage. It wasn't me. I'm just the opposite of this. I seek to never offend and see if I can figure out a way to, make any audience laugh. And
well, the general rule is to connect
storm.
with an audience. As an entertainer, you want to engage and connect. And your story, which, by the way, is told hilariously on your podcast, this guy kind of went off the rails.
Well, not for him. So, there's a subset of comics who do seek to either provoke or to say the shocking thing that nobody has ever said on a stage before. So kind of maybe the Lenny Bruce heritage, or I'm not afraid to use, this word, the N word, any word that is verboten, don't use this. Well, that my friend who I'm not even certain if I want to use his name.
Oh, that's okay. You could tell me off the air, but it's interesting that there are some comics that I, as a producer, always appreciate a comic that connects with an audience and brings the audience along on a journey of comedy and humor. But you're right. There's some that are antagonistic and they find humor. It's almost like a dark humor that, but it very iffy. It works sometimes and it doesn't work sometimes.
Oh, it's a high wire act. I mean, this person, I'm sure when I tell you, you'll say, oh yeah, but another person who worked that way would be Bobby Slayton.
He's
Bill
the first
Hicks.
one I thought of. Very, very funny.
No, it wasn't Bobby. It was not Bobby.
No, but Bobby's like that. He's very funny, but he doesn't care if he makes a friend in the world.
No, and he at times will go out of his. He told me once. He said, "I'd rather people remember me than laugh." In other words, he wants them to walk away knowing his name and remembering that night. And every comic 52 weeks a year gets their laughs, but most people don't remember every comic they saw, but they remember Bobby.
Oh yeah,
because of,
and he's had huge success, TV and movies and lots of radio, but he did have a more, as I said, antagonistic approach. But in your story on this podcast was about you made up the name Dirk, and he had a whole different approach with the audience.
Well, and in fact, I didn't make up the name Dirk Diggler. Dirk Diggler is the porn name that Mark Wahlberg took for his character in Boogie Nights. Oh. So it's a porn star. It's a fictional porn star name. But
I didn't know that. Sorry.
So the story is I was working in Fort Collins, Colorado, and the MC that week, it was his responsibility to drive me to the club. And then we had a one-night gig on Sunday night in Winter Park at the ski hill, which was great. Got to ski free. And so he's asking me, as all young comics ask, the headliner, when did you get into comedy? Where? How long before I get to headline? That kind of thing. And when he said, where'd you start out? And I said, well, basically San Francisco. He said, oh, do you know a comic named Dirk Diggler? And I could just tell the way he asked the question that this was going to be a really good story, especially if I didn't say, yeah, he's one of my best friends. So I just said, well, sure, I know him. And Dirk, fictional name Dirk, used to revel in coming back from the road and telling us stories about, he one time at the Dallas Improv got so irate with a guy sitting up front who, and people do this sometimes, and it made me, the only time that I lost it on stage was when somebody was doing this. They would repeat whatever you said a half second after you said it. And it was like an echo in the room.
Oh yeah, that'd be annoying.
And they were doing it to annoy. and it was Caesar's Lake Tahoe, and I lost it. I just started screaming at the guy to get out of the room. You know, it was amazing. And I've never done that in my life except that one time. Well, this guy was doing it to my friend Dirk at the Dallas Improv, and Dirk literally leapt off the stage and tackled this guy.
Oh, no. Really?
15 minutes into his headlining set, and tackled the guy. Security pulled him apart. Dirk storms out of the room. Show's over, folks. So he,
yeah, I think so.
He, you know, loves telling these stories, and no shame, no, you know, very proud of things that he's said, you know, to hecklers and put downs and various things.
Well, it's taking that idea of pushing the envelope one step too far and then kind of being proud of it. That is a little interesting.
Oh, yes. Oh, no. That's, you know, and that's just this unique subset of people that feel this is the victory that I had for that show. So at this club that particular week that Dirk was working with this young comic telling me the story, the State Department, U.S. State Department, had set up with the club. They were going to host a Saudi princess and her entourage. They were touring America, and the State Department wanted to show off America and have, you know, good experiences and you know, make deeper friendships with the Saudis because, of course, they have the oil. So, you know, we want to put up the best show we possibly can. Would you host the princess and her entourage? They said, fine. But the day of the show, the advance person from the State Department comes in and starts laying down all these rules. Literally, do not have your wait staff look the princess in the eye. You cannot make eye contact with her. You cannot speak to her. You have to speak to her helpers. They have to have a separate spot. There's going to be security. There's going to be Secret Service and Saudi security. And do not, you know, we've got to tell the audience to not look at her and make eye contact. They're going to be taken in separately, sit in a separate spot. So literally somebody gets up on stage before the show and says to the audience, we're going to have a special guest, and we want to, you know, America, an important ally with the Saudis, and we've got to, you know, you can't look at her don't even look at her when she walks in. You can't make eye contact. All these things. Well, the audience is just beyond uptight when they hear this, and so
yeah,
the doors
not for
open.
A great atmosphere for comedy.
It's the worst.
You go up and lay down all these rules, right? But I bet your friend, you know, found this line in the sand but something to leap across.
Oh, to take your tank and run right through that line. So they march in, the entourage, all these women in silks and securities and guys, you know, protecting them, and the audience immediately retightens back up. And then the first two comics go out, and literally no laughs at all. Just
the audience is afraid. Yeah, the audience is intimidated.
They're afraid. They don't know what to laugh at. If we're going to impress them, should we laugh at this, laugh at that? They don't even know what to do. So the show has been ruined by the presence of this entourage and their demands, right? So the audience is, you know, feeling kind of uptight and anti-Saudi princess at this point. Rick comes out and doesn't say good evening, or how about a round of applause for your generally funny other comics, or thank you for coming. He just walked to the side of the stage, looked directly at the princess right in the eye, and said, some people may see you as a princess. I see you as nothing more than a brown, and then the four-letter word that women despise.
Not the C word.
The C word, yes.
Oh, no.
He said to her, and because, you know, the complexion, Middle Eastern complexion, brown, I see you as nothing more than a brown C word. Now, he thought that was going to explode all the tension in the room, and he would be the hero because the audience went nuts with laughter because he was the only one who had the chutzpah, the balls, to confront the situation. Well, that's not what happened. What happened was...
I bet the audience and the princess kind of freaked out.
Security, they start talking into... You've seen in the movies when Secret Service, they talk into their sleeves because that's where the microphones are. They all started shouting, secure the princess, secure the princess. Guns were drawn.
No.
They descend, yes, they descend on the entourage and hustle them out of the room as if there had been an assassination attempt.
Oh, geez.
And then Dirk, says, well, that's our show. Good night.
Oh, geez, after the one line. Wow, that is... Well, first, ladies and gentlemen, this is a short version of a great story in Tim's podcast, An Agnostic's Guide to Heaven. But what a situation, not only for, everybody, the audience, the princess, the location, the host of the event, had to be one of the most militarized comedy pieces, and it's just scary to think about. But I don't, it's interesting because if we were to break it down to its parts, as much as he went way over the line, the situation in the State Department really made it an uncomfortable situation for everybody, the comics, the audience.
An impossible situation.
Yeah, and the princess wouldn't have been able to see any real, they should have just slipped her in quietly and not said anything. It would have been better. After all that tension, to do that, it is almost like pulling a weapon on that poor princess if she had been shocked.
Well, here's the kicker. So the kid tells me the story. I don't say, well, Rick's one of my good friends. I just kind of let it sit. Yeah, well, I can see that, I guess. He's that kind of guy. So I can't wait to get back to Los Angeles and call my friend Dirk and
ask him about it.
And ask him about it.
Yeah,
now,
what was his
this
take?
Guy, well, he normally, as I said, loved to tell these stories. He loved to tell the story about how he jumped off the stage and tackled the guy and the show's over. Normally, most of us would be ashamed, or that was less professional than you'd like, or you'd fear for your life, or fear that the club would never hire you again. Not this guy. But when I said, hey, Dirk, I just got back from Fort Collins, and have you worked there recently? Was there some sort of royalty in the audience one night? I said that, and he, no. Well, no,
he wasn't
that I
bragging?
worked with. No. He denied it. He said, this guy must have me confused with someone else. No. He described your act. It was you. No.
Oh,
For
wow.
20 plus. So it must have been so ugly a moment that went completely the opposite of his intention. He wanted to break the tension and blow it all up and start over and shock the audience into, wow, I can't believe he said that, but how cool was he to do that? The audience turned on him, by the way. The audience was suddenly on the princess's side. But
well, I understand him going straight at the problem, but I think he went a little too hard. And I think it's interesting that after having the bravado to brag about such instances, that this was so dramatic that he decided to play dumb and deny it is hysterical. Well, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, you got to listen to An Agnostic's Guide to Heaven. It's a great podcast. We don't have time on this particular show, but there's also a terrific story basically centered around Fig Newtons. But Tim,
life-saving Fig Newtons. Yes.
Life-saving Fig Newtons. Tim, you always tell a great story. Thanks so much for sharing your trip to Idaho, Ireland, and a little bit about your podcast. I hope that you have some more great shows and travel experiences coming up.
I hope so too. We'll see what's what. Yeah. I'm going to do a show this summer on a boat on a river. And if you think that there's a bad comedy environment when you're standing over the engine of a cruise ship on a river in Minnesota, man, it doesn't get much harder than that.
Well, also the experience of doing it in that model home with standing in the corner next to the plastic plant. Just, the senior citizen home. I mean, all the circumstances that we run into in stand-up comedy, just so colorful in so many different ways. Thanks so much for sharing your amazing experiences and in the way that you do. And it's so funny. Thank you so much, Tim.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, Tim Bedore, a terrific stand-up comic, radio personality. You can hear a lot of his Vague But True, which is his famous short stories on the Bob and Tom Show. But his podcast, An Agnostic's Guide to Heaven, is available on the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, right on your phone for free. And if you get a chance, listen to his shows and go to show 113 and hear the whole story about the Fig Newtons. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this has been your host, Scott Edwards, and my good comedy friend, Tim Bedore. Tim, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week with some great stand-up comedy for you. Thanks for listening. Tell a friend. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.